Brad Pitt stood on the balcony of a remote mountain lodge, gazing at the horizon as twilight painted the sky in dusky blues. A chilled wind rattled the pines, and he pulled his jacket closer. He was here, far from any glittering film set or red carpet, in search of solace, something intangible, a quiver in his spirit that pressed him into unexplored territories. Only a week before, a mysterious envelope had arrived at his Los Angeles home, addressed simply to Brad Pitt. No return address, no additional markings, just an elegant wax seal depicting a stylized labyrinth. Inside was a letter from an unknown correspondent claiming to be an art historian named Selena Crenshaw. She wrote of a hidden place known as the Labyrinth of Reflections, a legendary site rumored to house centuries of secret knowledge. Dear Mr. Pitt, forgive the intrusion. I hope this finds you well. I write with urgency. I've discovered traces of a fabled labyrinth rumored to stand in a mountainous corner of Central Europe. Within its twisted corridors, travelers have claimed to hear echoes of their own memories, as if the stone walls themselves record human experiences. Some say it's pure myth. I believe it's real, and it may be in grave danger. Your passion for cultural preservation is no secret, nor is your willingness to champion lesser-known treasures. I beg you to meet me at the Cold Crest Lodge in the Nordwin Peaks. It's an isolated spot, but from there we can trek into the mountains. What lies ahead could redefine what we understand about history and the human spirit. Yours sincerely, Selena Crenshaw. Brad had traveled extensively throughout his career, but never had he received such an enigmatic summons. Something about Selena's plea stirred his curiosity, a sense of calling he couldn't ignore. The following day, he quietly booked a flight, slipped away from his usual entourage, and arrived in this lonely corner of the world. Now, with the last rays of sun fading behind the peaks, he heard footsteps approaching. He turned to see a tall, auburn-haired woman with sharp features and a thoughtful expression. She wore a long coat and a scarf that fluttered in the evening breeze. "Mr. Pitt," she greeted softly. "I'm Selena Crenshaw." He offered a friendly nod. "Please call me Brad. It's nice to meet you." Your letter was quite intriguing. Selena's eyes flickered with relief. "Thank you for coming. I know this must seem bizarre. An unknown historian urging you to fly halfway around the world. But I feared if I revealed too much by mail, it might attract unwanted attention." Brad, always alert, caught the edge of worry in her tone. "Is someone else after this labyrinth?" She exhaled, her breath clouding in the chilly air. "I've heard rumors of individuals seeking it for personal gain. They believe it holds artifacts, priceless items, or cryptic documents. Others think it's a doorway to some deeper human consciousness. Whatever the truth, we must act quietly and responsibly." Before Brad could reply, a man in a heavy sweater appeared at the lodge doorway, calling, "Dinner is served." Selena motioned for Brad to follow. "Let's talk inside where it's warm." The lodge's interior was rustic yet welcoming, a crackling fireplace casting dancing shadows on timber walls. They settled at a corner table, the glow of a lantern illuminating their hushed conversation. Selena spread out a worn parchment map she retrieved from her coat pocket. Faded lines snaked across the page, culminating in a large spiral shape. "I found this in an abandoned archive in Prague," she explained. "It references a labyrinth of reflections believed to reside in these mountains. Local folklore suggests it's not just a maze of stone corridors. It's a place where echoes of the past linger." Brad leaned in, carefully tracing the lines with his gaze. "You really think something like that exists?" Selena hesitated. "I know it sounds fantastical, but I've studied historical accounts from multiple sources, some going back 500 or 600 years. They speak of wanderers entering a hidden complex of chambers where they could hear faint whispers of events long gone, even glimpses of lost knowledge. Those who returned claimed the labyrinth shaped them, forcing them to confront unspoken truths. A subtle thrill traveled along Brad's spine. He'd experienced his share of extraordinary moments in life, yet this possibility felt distinctly different. It beckoned him with a sense of wonder. "Tomorrow we find it," Selena nodded. We'll hire a local guide named Oswald. He's discreet and knows these mountains better than anyone. According to my research, the labyrinth's entrance is near a craggy valley about 10 miles north. We might face treacherous terrain and bitter cold, so we must prepare. Outside, the wind whistled through pine branches. Brad sipped his coffee, a quiet resolve forming within him. He had come searching for a spark, a real experience beyond cameras and scripts. Perhaps this labyrinth would be that spark. That night, he dreamt of winding corridors lit by flickering torches, each step echoing with unrecognizable voices. When he woke at dawn, the dream lingered, urging him onward. He packed a small rucksack, warm layers, boots, a canteen, gloves, and a flashlight. At breakfast, Selena introduced Oswald, a broad-shouldered man with a thick gray beard and an air of silent competence. He greeted Brad politely, but displayed little deference, which Brad found refreshing. Oswald simply laid out their route, explained the potential dangers, and told them he expected quick progress if the weather held. By mid-morning, they set off. The lodge vanished behind them as they climbed narrow trails hugging sheer cliffs. Mist clung to the slopes, and distant ravens cawed from unseen perches. Brad found himself strangely invigorated by each gust of frigid air, each slip of rock underfoot. The monotony of airport lounges and paparazzi snapshots felt a world away. Selena led the way, occasionally checking her map. She pointed out a series of landmarks. A crooked oak tree perched on a ridge, a cluster of boulders shaped like jagged teeth, a shallow creek winding through a ravine. Oswald watched quietly, guiding them around hidden ice patches and ensuring they remained steady on the precarious route. Around midday, the clouds thickened, threatening snow. Selena halted at a vantage point overlooking a valley. "This should be the place," she said breathlessly. The labyrinth entrance is rumored to lie at the base of those cliffs. Even from a distance, Brad noticed the cliff's peculiar formation, angled layers of stone resembling folded pages in a massive book. The wind stirred snowflakes in swirling eddies. "We'd better move before the weather turns worse," he suggested, hooking a glove over his rucksack strap. They descended into the valley, picking their way through treacherous rock slides. The temperature plummeted, and flurries of snow clung to their hair and jackets. Selena paused to compare the surroundings with her map. At last, she spotted a wedge-shaped gap where the cliff face met the valley floor. "There, let's check it out." Oswald approached it first, sweeping aside loose stones to reveal a narrow crack leading into darkness. He turned, face grim. "It's real, but it's tight, and the air is stale." Brad peered in, his heartbeat drumming with anticipation. This was no ordinary cave entrance. Large stones have been deliberately arranged to disguise the opening. "Feels like we're the first in a long time to come here," he said, turning his flashlight on. Selena's voice trembled with excitement. "We must be careful. There's no telling what the labyrinth is truly like, or if it's still stable inside." One by one, they squeezed through the gap. The passage sloped downward, the air growing dank and cold. Water dripped from overhead, forming tiny puddles and cracks underfoot. The flashlight beams revealed a tunnel hewn from ancient stone blocks, faint carvings on the walls. Oswald scouted ahead with stoic caution. Selena ran her hand along the carvings, her expression awed. Brad tried to steady his breathing, for something about this place radiated an ancient hush. They emerged into a small chamber, lit only by their flashlights. Arches overhead formed a domed ceiling. Faded symbols lined the perimeter, a spiral glyph repeated countless times. In the center, a stone pedestal bore a bowl-shaped depression, empty except for dust. "What is this?" Brad whispered, stepping closer. Selena traced the glyph with her fingertip. "It's the same labyrinth symbol from the letter's wax seal. We might be in the outer sanctum." The accounts mention that the labyrinth proper lies deeper. Oswald tested the chamber walls, looking for hidden exits. Eventually, he discovered a concealed corridor behind a half-collapsed pillar, just wide enough to admit a person. A musty draft seeped through, carrying the faintest echo of, could it be voices? All three listened, hearts pounding. Yes, there was again a hush of distant murmurs, like a crowd whispering behind the walls. Selena's eyes widened. The labyrinth of reflections. Stealing themselves, they ventured into the corridor. Every footstep resonated with uncanny clarity, as if the stone intentionally amplified the sound. Brad's pulse quickened. Was that just an echo, or something more? They reached a spiral staircase, descending into shadow. The air felt charged, prickling with intangible energy. Selena hesitated at the top step. If the legends are true, she said softly, the labyrinth reveals echoes of the past, maybe even illusions of things left unresolved in our own lives. Brad glanced at her, his mind flitting over personal regrets, unspoken feelings. It was easier to stand before millions of fans than to face certain corners of his own memory. Yet, he felt an unexplainable compulsion to continue. We came this far, he said, mustering courage. Let's see what's down there. Oswald grunted agreement, leading the descent. The spiral steps were slick, twisting into gloom. Their flashlights illuminated carved stone murals, a progression of scenes. Crowds in archaic clothing, priests chanting around a central fire, travelers kneeling at what looked like a mirror. The final set of steps emptied into a vast chamber. The floor was smooth stone inlaid with silver lines forming an elaborate labyrinth pattern. The walls soared upward, vanishing into darkness. Opposite them, an archway led further into a network of corridors. Yet something else seized Brad's attention. At the chamber's center stood a statue, a robed figure with outstretched arms, face hidden by a featureless mask. And across the statue's chest, faint light shimmered, though no visible torch or lamp illuminated it. Selena gasped. Do you see that glow? It's as if the statue itself breathes. Brad approached cautiously. As he did, a gentle vibration tremored beneath his feet, accompanied by a low hum echoing through the stone labyrinth. A swirl of air brushed past him, whispering fragments of sound. Like a memory drifting on the wind, he froze, scanning the chamber. Had he imagined it? Or did he truly hear a voice? Oswald narrowed his eyes, gripping his flashlight like a club. Selena trembled with excitement, scribbling frantic notes. They circled the statue, finding symbols etched along its base. Intricate labyrinthine motifs merging into shapes resembling eyes and ears. Selena deciphered a few partial inscriptions. It speaks of recording the steps of those who enter. Perhaps the labyrinth is an archive of experiences. Brad exhaled slowly. So it might reflect whatever burdens we carry. She nodded, a flicker of empathy in her gaze. Yes, or events from centuries of visitors. We have to keep going to see if there's an ultimate purpose or a place where these echoes converge. Oswald gestured toward the archway. We moved carefully. The structure might be unstable, and so they ventured deeper, following corridors that branched in labyrinthine patterns. Each time they reached a junction, distant echoes curled around them, half-formed words hinting at old languages or fleeting phrases. Occasionally, the air would pulse with a soft glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Within an hour, their progress slowed. The labyrinth's layout was maddening. Passages curved back on themselves, descending into half-submerged catacombs or leading to abrupt dead ends. Old debris lay scattered, broken pottery, rusted lanterns, scraps of cloth, a testament that others had once ventured here. The whispered echoes grew stronger, swirling with increasing clarity. A hushed child's laughter, a lamenting chorus of voices, even a faint snippet of a melody. Brad felt goosebumps on his arms. These were not random noises. They held emotional undertones, conjuring glimpses of personal stories. At one juncture, Selena suddenly stopped. Her flashlight trembled in her hand. I hear my grandmother's voice, she whispered, eyes brimming with confusion. She used to sing that lullaby to me when I was small. The faint melody drifted down the corridor, vanishing into the gloom. Selena clutched Brad's arm, shaken. She's been gone for years. How can this place echo her lullaby? Brad's pulse thundered. If the labyrinth absorbs the experiences of those who enter, maybe it resonates with our own memories, somehow replaying them. A reflection of what lies in our hearts. Oswald stared at them, uneasy. This is beyond natural. We can't linger too long, or we might lose ourselves. Yet they pressed on, drawn by an indescribable magnetism. The corridors led them to another chamber, this one smaller, with mirrored walls that rose to the ceiling. Each panel was dulled by centuries of dust. Still, the reflection of their flashlights glinted faintly, scattering fragmented light across the space. Selina approached the largest mirror, carefully wiping away cobwebs. Her own face stared back, distorted by time-worn silver backing. Suddenly, a ripple seemed to pass through the reflection. Instead of her modern coat, the mirror showed an old-fashioned gown, her hair pinned in 19th-century style. She gasped, stepping back. Oswald muttered an oath. Brad inched closer, shining the flashlight on another panel. His reflection flickered, showing a younger version of himself, long before he had become a public figure, back in Missouri, with earnest eyes and an uncertain grin. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the image vanished, replaced by his current form. A hush fell, broken only by their shaky breathing. Selina spoke first, voice unsteady. This labyrinth is more than an echo. It's reflecting our personal histories or possible illusions of them. We have to be extremely cautious. Brad felt a swirl of emotion. He'd lived so many lives, on screen and off, yet here he was confronted with a simpler version of himself. Had he lost certain dreams along the way? The labyrinth seemed to pose that question. Oswald urged them onward, nervous about the structural integrity. They advanced through the mirrored chamber to a narrow threshold, leading to a descending staircase. A slow draft wafted up from below, tinged with a subtle heat. "We're going deeper underground," Oswald murmured, checking the damp stone steps. It might be volcanic veins or something warming the corridor. Selina's grip on her notebook was white-knuckled. "Let's proceed. If the labyrinth has a core, some central hall, perhaps that's where we'll find an explanation. Or at least some sense of closure." Brad looked back at the mirrored walls, half expecting to see the illusions again. But they were still silent. He inhaled and followed Selina and Oswald downward, the echoes of half-forgotten voices humming at the edges of his perception. Unbeknownst to them, they were not alone. Far behind, a stealthy figure slipped into the labyrinth's entrance, leaving faint footprints in the dust. Chapter 2. Murmurs of the lost. The deeper they descended, the warmer the air became. The dripping water overhead ceased, replaced by the distant rush of an underground current. The corridor opened into another chamber, a sprawling cavern glimmering with crystals embedded in the stone. Their flashlights reflected off the facets, scattering prismatic sparks. Oswald tested the ground with each step. Some areas looked unstable, large fissures marbling the floor. Brad and Selina followed carefully, mesmerized by the dancing lights. The space seemed less oppressive than previous tunnels, but the sense of mystery only intensified. A hush enveloped them, broken by Selina's quiet observation. "Look at these crystals. Some of them are newly formed, others shattered. Perhaps there was seismic activity." Brad crouched to examine a cluster of shards. "It's beautiful, almost like the labyrinth has pockets of living geology." As they advanced through the cavern, the echoes resumed, a swirl of half-heard words drifting along the walls. Sometimes the language was incomprehensible, ancient. Other times, it sounded painfully familiar. "Brad? Brad," he froze. Had he just heard his own name? It was faint, as though carried on a distant wind. It had sent a jolt through his entire body. "Did you hear that?" Brad whispered, scanning the shadows. Selina nodded, her face troubled. "Yes, it was calling you." Before they could decide what to do, a section of the cavern wall collapsed with a thunderous crash, sending shards of crystal skittering across the floor. They jumped back, hearts pounding. Dust clouded the air. "Watch out!" Oswald shouted, pulling Selena away from a falling chunk of stone. Brad scrambled aside, coughing as debris rained down. When the dust settled, they found themselves separated by a jagged heap of rubble. Oswald and Selena stood on one side, Brad on the other, with a newly formed barricade blocking the way. Oswald shouted, "Are you okay?" Brad coughed, shining his flashlight around. "Yes, I'm fine. We're cut off." The partial collapse had sealed the path behind them. On Brad's side, the cavern opened into a smaller passage, slanting downward. Selena's muffled voice called, "Can you find a way around?" He examined the rubble. Trying to clear it alone might be impossible. "Maybe there's another route ahead," he shouted back. "I'll try to loop back." Selena's response was faint but determined. "We'll do the same. Be careful." Brad had no choice but to proceed, stepping around broken crystals that crunched underfoot. The new passage was narrower, the temperature even warmer, as though an unseen vent heated the air. He pressed forward, occasionally calling out to gauge if Oswald and Selena were anywhere nearby. But all he heard were echoes, the labyrinth mimicking his own voice, playing it back in eerie fragments. He found himself in a sloping tunnel that curved gently to the left. The walls were inscribed with more spiral motifs, though some had been worn away by water. The distant hum of subterranean current grew louder. At length, he emerged onto a ledge overlooking an astonishing sight, a vast underground river, its waters shimmering with faint luminescence. The tunnel's path continued along the ledge, hugging the rock face. This river was likely the labyrinth's lifeblood, cutting a path through the deep. Brad carefully made his way along the ledge. One misstep could send him plunging into the swirling water below. Now and then, an echo broke the silence, fleeting words that sounded like pleas or confessions from countless ages. Abruptly, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Across the river, on another stone pathway, he glimpsed a figure, tall, dressed in dark clothing, holding a dim lantern. The stranger paused, seeming to spot Brad across the chasm. "Hello," Brad called, relief surging at the sight of another person. The figure did not reply. Instead, they raised the lantern, revealing piercing eyes. Then they turned and disappeared around a bend, as if unwilling to engage. A chill snaked through Brad. He was certain the labyrinth was not supposed to have random explorers. Could this be the same threat Selena had mentioned? Someone seeking the labyrinth for selfish ends? He pressed on, determined to find a way back to Selena and Oswald. Perhaps the path on his side would lead to a bridge or a crossing. The ledge soon led him to a stone arch bridging the underground river, though it looked ancient and precarious. He tested the first step. It held his weight, but barely. Gaps in the stone revealed swirling waters far below. Brad inhaled sharply, steeling his resolve. If he wanted to reunite with the others, he had to cross. Step by careful step, he advanced. Halfway across, the stone shifted beneath him. With a crack, part of the bridge crumbled, tumbling into the river in a spray of water. He dove forward, managing to land on the far side, panting in adrenaline-fueled terror. Looking back, the bridge was now impassable. No turning around. He wiped sweat from his brow, forcing himself to continue. Once on the opposite bank, the labyrinth's corridors resumed. Here, the architecture seemed older, the stone blocks worn and partially caked with mineral deposits. Strange etchings lined the walls. Images of robed figures gathered around swirling shapes, reminiscent of cosmic spirals. Passing a half-collapsed doorway, Brad glimpsed a small room that looked like a shrine. At its center stood a circular pool fed by a trickling waterfall. Pale light emanated from the pool's waters. Intrigued, he stepped inside. The water's glow turned the chamber into a dreamlike world of reflections. As he neared the pool, an echo drifted across the hush, a voice resembling his father's, calling his name from long ago. Confused, Brad peered into the glowing water. The surface rippled, revealing fleeting images, his childhood home, a birthday party from decades back, moments he hadn't thought about in years. Tears pricked his eyes. Was the labyrinth unearthing these memories to test him or to offer some sort of closure? He knelt by the pool, caught between wonder and ache. Suddenly, a soft noise stirred behind him. He whirled around, shining his flashlight. A figure stood in the doorway, partially masked by shadows. Not Selina or Oswald. This was the same mysterious individual he had glimpsed across the river, the lantern casting flickering light on their face. Brad rose slowly, heart hammering. "Who are you?" he demanded. The stranger stepped forward, a lean man with sharp cheekbones, black hair tied back. He wore simple, functional clothes, but his eyes gleamed with purpose. He pressed a finger to his lips, shushing Brad. "Quiet," he whispered in accented English. "The Labyrinth listens." Brad sized him up cautiously. "I'm just trying to find my friends. We got separated." The man nodded, not unkindly. "Yes, the Labyrinth has a way of dividing people. I'm known as Gabriel Soren. You must be Brad Pitt. Word travels far even here." Brad stiffened at the mention of his name. "How do you know about me? Why are you here?" Gabriel's lips curved in a half-smile. "I've been researching this labyrinth for years, following obscure leads. It's said to hold hidden manuscripts and relics from ancient civilizations, priceless knowledge, or treasure, if you will." "So you're a treasure hunter?" Brad asked, suspicion lacing his tone. Gabriel shrugged. "I'm an antiquarian. We might share similar goals, uncovering truths. But I fear your presence complicates matters. The labyrinth is delicate. Not everyone who enters emerges unscathed." Brad studied him, uncertain if he could be trusted. "A friend of mine, Selina Crenshaw, also discovered references to this place. She wanted to protect it from exploitation." A flicker of recognition crossed Gabriel's face at Selina's name. "She's an art historian, correct?" "Yes, I know of her research. Noble intentions, but she underestimates how many powerful individuals might covet what the labyrinth hides." "Have you seen her?" "We're a guide named Oswald. We got separated by a cave-in." Gabriel shook his head. "No, I've been traversing these corridors alone. But if we join forces, we might find them and ensure that no one else stumbles on the labyrinth's secrets." Brad weighed his options. Gabriel was an enigma, and the labyrinth was too perilous to navigate alone. "Fine," he said carefully, "but I need to find Selina and Oswald. That's my priority." "Agreed," Gabriel replied. "But the labyrinth is shifting. Some passages open, others collapse. We must hurry." He turned, beckoning Brad to follow. Before Brad left the shrine, he took a final glance at the glowing pool. The fleeting images of his past were gone, replaced by swirling lights. Taking a steadying breath, he followed Gabriel back into the corridor. They wove through twisting hallways, the echoes intensifying. Some were joyous, others heartbreaking. The labyrinth's floor felt almost alive beneath their feet, as if trembling with thousands of stories. Gabriel led with uncanny intuition, occasionally pausing to listen at intersections. "Down here," he murmured at one point, guiding them along a descending ramp that opened into a wide passage lit by phosphorescent lichen. Soon, Brad heard faint voices echoing from ahead, more real than the labyrinth's illusions. He quickened his step. They turned a corner and emerged into a broad hall where Selina and Oswald stood, breathing heavily. "Brad!" Selina exclaimed, relief etched on her face. "You're all right." He ran to them, heart lifting. "Yes. Are you hurt?" Oswald shook his head. "We're fine. We found a circuitous route around the collapsed section." "But who's this?" He glared at Gabriel with a guarded stance. Gabriel offered a polite nod. "Gabriel Soren, an ally, I believe. I found Brad wandering on the opposite side of the river." Selina's eyes narrowed. "Soren? I've read about your expeditions. Some say you deal in black market antiquities." Gabriel's face remained calm. "I'm a historian, not a criminal. But yes, rumors swirl. In truth, I want to preserve precious artifacts, though at times that means obtaining them before they're sold to unscrupulous collectors." Selina was not entirely convinced, but Brad intervened, explaining how Gabriel helped him cross the labyrinth. "We should stick together," he concluded. "There might be more dangers ahead." Oswald studied Gabriel for a moment, then nodded curtly. "Very well. But if you try anything suspicious, we part ways. They agreed to move as a group. Gabriel, seemingly unconcerned by their distrust, led them deeper into the labyrinth. Along the way, they compared notes. Selena believed the labyrinth's core might be an enormous chamber known as the Hall of Resonance, where the collected echoes converge. If they reached it, they might understand the labyrinth's true nature and how to safeguard it. Gabriel, for his part, hinted that certain manuscripts rumored to be hidden in that core could rewrite vast chapters of human history. He refused to elaborate fully, likely to maintain leverage. At length, they entered a corridor lined with towering statues, each figure bearing a stylized mask, arms raised as if beckoning. Their carved faces glowed faintly, reflecting an unseen light source. The air rippled with a soft hum that vibrated in their ears. Selena paused, transfixed by the statue's artistry. Incredible. These are much older than the earlier carvings, maybe from an advanced, lost civilization. She approached one statue, marveling at the intricate folds in the robes, each fold etched with minuscule symbols. Brad approached another statue, shining his flashlight up at the masked face. Suddenly, a whisper of movement behind him made him whirl around. The statue's arm, did it just shift? His eyes widened, heart pounding. He blinked. No, it must have been a trick of the flashlight's beam. Statues don't move. But then another statue's mask seemed to tilt, ever so slightly, as though following their progress. Selena gasped, stumbling back. Brad, am I imagining this? Gabriel stepped forward, observing intently. This labyrinth is alive in ways we can't explain. Let's proceed with caution. They continued along the corridor, the masked statues flanking them on both sides, silent sentinels. The hum grew louder, resonating in their chests. As they neared the corridor's end, a final statue loomed, taller, crowned with a symbol resembling an eclipse. From behind that statue came a burst of swirling echoes, so loud and layered that the group clapped their hands over their ears. A torrent of voices poured forth, laughter, sobs, words in countless languages, a chaotic tapestry of memory. The corridor reverberated, making the air quake. Suddenly, the statue's mask cracked, revealing an inner glow. The echo storm intensified, as if the labyrinth was testing them, or trying to convey a message. Brad felt his mind swirl with images, fleeting glimpses of red carpet events, childhood summers, missed opportunities, triumphant achievements. His entire life laid bare in a kaleidoscope. Selena shouted something, but her voice was lost in the roar. Then, Oswald lunged toward the statue, striking it with the butt of his flashlight. In an instant, the glow sputtered out. The corridor fell silent, except for their ragged breathing. Madness, muttered Oswald, shaken. This place is madness. Gabriel's face was pale. We must be close to the labyrinth's heart. It's defending itself or warning us. Selena tried to steady her breathing. Let's keep going, but perhaps we should rest first. If these echoes grow any stronger, we need our wits about us. The others agreed. Exhaustion weighed on them, both physical and psychological. They found a small alcove off the corridor, relatively safe, to set up a brief camp. By the flicker of a battery lantern, they ate energy bars and drank from canteens, the oppressive hush of the labyrinth pressing in. Brad settled against a stone wall, gazing at the swirl of dancing shadows. He felt raw, as if the labyrinth had peeled back layers of armor he'd spent a lifetime building. Nearby, Selena quietly studied her notebook, while Oswald stood watch and Gabriel scouted the corridor's perimeter. None of them spoke much. The labyrinth had already revealed too many secrets, and a deeper trial likely awaited them in the days to come. Chapter 3. The Abyssal Gates. Early the next day, though they couldn't be sure of time in this subterranean realm, they resumed their journey. The corridor beyond the masked statue ended in a heavy stone door carved with swirling shapes. Gabriel, surprisingly adept at puzzle-like mechanisms, found hidden switches that caused the door to rumble open. revealing a downward slope that glowed with a muted crimson light. A wave of heat struck them. The air smelled faintly of sulfur. They exchanged uneasy glances. Was there a geothermal vent beneath the labyrinth's core? Oswald tested the path with a cautious step. "We can't turn back now," he muttered. They ventured down, flashlights scanning walls dripping with condensation. The deeper they went, the warmer it became, sweat beating on their foreheads despite the frigid mountain climate above. Faint red luminescence seeped through cracks in the stone, suggesting hidden molten rock or bizarre mineral deposits. At last, they emerged into an immense cavern, molten rivers cutting across its floor like glowing veins. Stone walkways crisscrossed overhead, forming a labyrinth within a labyrinth. Towering columns supported the cavern ceiling, each carved with labyrinthine motifs that spiraled upward. Selena's breath caught. In all my research, I never imagined something this grand or this dangerous. Gabriel studied the environment with awe. If the labyrinth was constructed around natural geothermal features, they might have harnessed this power, or used it as a test of resolve. Oswald pointed to a walkway arching above a river of molten rock. That might lead further into the center, but crossing it, we risk extreme heat. Brad wiped sweat from his brow, taking in the scorching currents below. We've come too far to stop. They ascended a ramp of black basalt, the temperature rising with each step. The walkway overhead was narrow, lacking railings, the molten river churning beneath. Moving quickly, they traversed it one by one, every breath searing their lungs. A third of the way across, the walkway shuddered, ancient stone loosening from eons of disrepair. Brad fought to keep his balance, heart pounding. Behind him, Selena stifled a cry as pebbles clattered into the molten stream. At the halfway point, the walkway split into two directions, one path leading left, the other right, both vanishing into columns of steam. They hesitated, uncertain which route pointed to the labyrinth's core. Gabriel pressed a hand to the walkway's surface, frowning. "Let's go left. The stone here is slightly cooler." No one else had a better plan, so they followed him. The path twisted among jagged spires until they reached a small platform overshadowed by a massive basalt pillar. Carvings on the pillar displayed robed figures prostrating themselves before a giant labyrinth symbol, as if worshipping it. "There's a door," Selena observed, pointing to a rectangular outline in the pillar's base. Approaching carefully, they found a hidden latch. Gabriel worked it, and the heavy basalt slab slid aside, revealing an interior passage swirling with cooler air. With relief, they slipped through, shutting the door behind them. Inside, the temperature dropped to a bearable level. They stepped into a corridor lit by flickering torches. Actual torches still burning. Oswald's eyes widened. But that means someone else is here recently. Brad felt a surge of anxiety. Who would keep torches lit in this hidden realm? He recalled the stealthy figure he'd seen before meeting Gabriel. Perhaps that person had ventured even deeper. They proceeded cautiously, the corridor's smooth walls reflecting dancing torchlight. A rhythmic pulsing sound echoed from ahead, like a heartbeat. Each pulse made the stone quiver, as if the labyrinth itself was alive. Gabriel's expression grew tense. Whatever lies ahead must be the labyrinth's heart, literally or metaphorically. Be on guard. Moments later, they arrived at a set of massive double doors fashioned from dark metal. Intricate reliefs covered their surface, swirling labyrinth designs interwoven with stylized faces, each expression filled with longing or wonder. Selena ran her fingers over the metal. This craftsmanship is beyond anything I've seen. It could be thousands of years old, or perhaps maintained by secretive caretakers. Without warning, the doors began to rumble open from within, revealing a vast chamber. The group exchanged wary glances but stepped forward, flashlights raised. The chamber was circular, ringed by a series of tall columns. At the center stood a colossal structure resembling an enormous sphere or orb, formed from black stone etched with labyrinthine patterns. The sphere pulsed with a faint luminescence at intervals, each pulse accompanied by that heartbeat-like thrum. More astonishingly, the floor around the sphere was inlaid with glass-like panels through which images flickered. Ghostly scenes played out, glimpses of medieval gatherings, ancient ceremonies, more modern vistas, and countless other vignettes that seemed to replay fragments of human history. The effect was mesmerizing, as if peering into a cosmic archive. Selena pressed a hand to her mouth, tears welling. This is the labyrinth of reflections, the central archive of all echoes it's collected over centuries. Brad felt the hair on his neck rise. Scenes flitted beneath the glass. A candlelit vigil from the 1600s, a grand library from the 1800s, even glimpses of modern city life. He saw fleeting images of himself, film sets, personal memories. They vanished as quickly as they appeared. Oswald muttered in disbelief. The labyrinth is a living record. Gabriel's eyes shone with a mix of awe and ambition. If these are truly reflections of countless lives, then the knowledge here is immeasurable. Brad stepped onto the glass, heart pounding. The orb at the center pulsed again, and a swirl of voices rose in unison, unseen, intangible. He sensed no malevolence, only a deep yearning, as though the labyrinth sought to share or preserve what had been entrusted to it. Selena moved closer to the orb, carefully placing her hand against its surface. A shimmer of energy rippled outward. She gasped, tears streaming. It's showing me events from my grandmother's life. Things I never knew. Oswald approached, eyes wide. If you listen carefully, maybe it can help you find closure. But we must be cautious. Such power could overwhelm us. Gabriel, however, circled the orb with hungry fascination, eyeing a raised dais behind it. On that dais rested a stone pedestal supporting a thick, ancient book bound in tarnished metal. That must be one of the labyrinth's tomes, he whispered. The rumored manuscripts. Selena glanced at him sharply. Gabriel, are you planning to remove it? He met her gaze, half apologetic. I only want to study it. The knowledge here should not be locked away from humanity. But yes, certain individuals might misuse it. We must be prudent. Brad, sensing tension, stood between them. No one is removing anything without understanding the labyrinth's wishes. This place, it feels like it's alive. How do we ask for permission? Before they could answer, a hissing sound reverberated through the chamber. The metal doors behind them slammed shut. A swirl of torches flared along the walls, casting everything in an orange glow. A voice, low and resonant, echoed across the dome. You have come far, but do you seek to protect or to plunder? They froze, hearts thunderstruck. The voice seemed to emanate from the orb itself, each syllable vibrating the stone columns. Selena stepped forward, voice trembling but resolute. We only want to understand, to preserve. The orb pulsed, intensifying. All who enter bring their stories. The labyrinth weighs them. If your intent is pure, you may leave with enlightenment. If not, you will remain forever, another echo among many. Gabriel paled. We just want knowledge. Knowledge, the voice rumbled, is not a trinket to be stolen. You must prove you can bear the burden of this place. The glass floor flickered, showing disjointed images from each of their lives. Brad glimpsed personal regrets, missed family gatherings, kind gestures left undone. Selena saw heartbreak in her past. Oswald's stoicism cracked as a scene of a lost loved one flickered. Even Gabriel wore an expression of haunted reflection. The labyrinth forced them to confront their vulnerabilities. Yet it wasn't attacking them physically. Rather, it was testing their hearts, challenging them to acknowledge mistakes, regret, hope, and willingness to change. A swirl of wind whipped around the chamber, rattling the orb's surface. The voice grew softer, almost compassionate. If you accept your truths, you may proceed. If you resist, the labyrinth shall keep you. At that moment, a harsh shout echoed behind them. They turned to see a group of men forcing the metal doors open, carrying high-powered lights and tools. They wore heavy gear, their leader a tall figure with a cunning grin. Well, the leader drawled. Looks like we're late to the party. Gabriel cursed under his breath. Mercenaries, perhaps. I was warned others might come. Selena's face blanched. They'll tear this place apart. The new arrivals spread out across the chamber, shining beams on the orb and the glass floor. The labyrinth's voice pulsed in alarm, the orb flickering erratically. "Careful, boss," one man said. "This place is strange. Feels like it's alive." Their leader snorted. "Then we'll tame it. We've got a buyer offering millions for any relics or data we retrieve." Brad's stomach churned in anger. The labyrinth was no commodity. He glanced at Selena, who looked determined. They couldn't let these men ravage the site. While the mercenaries were momentarily distracted, Oswald whispered, "We must protect the labyrinth." "But they're armed." Gabriel's face hardened. "If they breach the orb or the manuscripts, the labyrinth's entire legacy could be destroyed or weaponized." As if sensing the threat, the orb emitted a piercing wail that shook the chamber. The glass floor erupted with swirling images, and the columns rumbled dangerously. Fractures skittered across the dome. The leader shouted commands, his men aiming flashlights and crowbars at the orb. "Grab that book. Smash anything that gets in your way." Brad glanced at the small group, hearts pounding. They were unarmed except for a single climbing pick Oswald carried, while the mercenaries clearly had advanced equipment. Could they rely on the labyrinth's defenses alone? The labyrinth's voice hissed, "Test them. If their hearts thirst only for gain, the labyrinth will purge them." A sudden quake rocked the chamber, sending mercenaries staggering. One man swung a crowbar at the orb, but the blow glanced off with a spark of energy. The labyrinth roared, its echo filled with centuries of anger at those who would profane its sanctity. Gabriel dashed to the dais, scooping the ancient book from its pedestal. Selena cried out, "We shouldn't remove it." "No choice," Gabriel rasped. "They'll destroy it if we leave it behind." A mercenary advanced on him, brandishing a baton. Brad lunged, grappling the attacker. They stumbled across the glass floor, which flickered with chaotic images of conflict from ages past. The swirl of memories tangled with reality, distorting their sense of space. Oswald used his climbing pick to fend off another assailant, while Selena tried to shield the orb with her body. The labyrinth's pulses accelerated, cracks appearing in the columns. It seemed the entire cavern might collapse. The leader bellowed, "We'll bring this place down if we must." A final quake convulsed the chamber. The columns groaned, sending shards of stone tumbling. The mercenaries hesitated, some scrambling for the exit as the labyrinth retaliated. Gabriel clutched the book to his chest, meeting Brad's eye. "We must find a path out, or the labyrinth will bury us all." Selena yelled over the chaos, "This way. I see a corridor behind the orb that might lead upward." The group fought through swirling debris, the orb's wails echoing. Some mercenaries were pinned by falling stones. Others fled back through the metal doors. The labyrinth's voice thundered again. "Those who defile the echoes shall be lost to dust." Brad and Selena, with Oswald and Gabriel, dashed behind the orb. Indeed, there was a smaller exit carved into the stone, half obscured by swirling illusions. They forced their way in, ignoring the labyrinth's deafening roar. The corridor beyond twisted upward in a steep spiral. Behind them, the chamber erupted in a storm of collapsing columns and raging illusions. The final glimpse of the orb showed it shining like a furious star, as if forging a final stand. Sweat poured down their faces as they climbed the spiral corridor. The warmth receded, replaced by cooler currents. The floor shook intermittently, but gradually the tremors lessened. Finally, they emerged into a smaller chamber that smelled of fresh mountain air. A faint glow streamed through a crack in the ceiling. The labyrinth's furious echoes faded behind them, replaced by an eerie silence. They were battered, exhausted, hearts pounding, but they were alive, and they had the book. Gabriel sank to the floor, the ancient tome pressed against his chest. Selena, tears streaming, whispered, "The labyrinth's final outcry, was it destroyed or merely sealed again?" Brad dropped onto a ledge, trying to calm his breathing. "I don't know, but we have to get out of here. Make sure no more mercenaries come." Oswald examined the crack above them. I think if we clear some rubble, we can reach the surface. The question is, where exactly we'll emerge? No one replied, each lost in thought. The labyrinth had bared its soul, unleashing echoes of centuries. They had glimpsed wonders and horrors, and now carried a relic that could shape the future. As they began clearing stone from the blocked exit, the memory of the labyrinth's voice lingered. If your intent is pure, you may leave with enlightenment. If not, you will remain forever. Brad wondered which path they had taken. Were they truly free, or had they merely awakened a deeper responsibility to safeguard the labyrinth's secrets? Chapter 4. Echoes in the wind, they managed to pry open a gap wide enough for them to crawl through, reaching a narrow ledge on a mountainside. Pale light of early morning illuminated a snowy slope below, the altitude suggesting they'd emerged far above the valley. Selena squinted, adjusting to the brightness after hours in darkness. We must be near the summit ridge, she guessed. Let's climb down carefully. Oswald went first, anchoring ropes and guiding them across treacherous rock faces. The wind stung their cheeks, but the crisp air felt liberating after the labyrinth's stale confines. Brad took in the vast panorama, jagged peaks slicing the sky, swirling clouds tinted by the dawn. Despite the chilling fear and raw power of what they'd witnessed underground, the world above remained serenely unaware. Gabriel, though bruised and exhausted, clutched the ancient book. Selena occasionally cast him a wary look, but said nothing. Perhaps they all needed time to process what had happened. They descended for hours, eventually spotting a faint trail that led toward the foothills. Signs of human activity appeared. An old mountain hut, snowshoe tracks. The normalcy felt almost surreal. By midday, they reached a plateau with gentler terrain. Cautiously, they found a sheltered spot near a stream to rest. Brad soaked a cloth in the icy water, cleaning dust from his face. Selena sat beside him, gazing at the labyrinth's tome that Gabriel had set aside. Its cover bore the swirling labyrinth symbol etched in tarnished metal, a single clasp keeping it shut. She asked quietly, "Do you think we did the right thing, removing it?" Brad sighed. "I don't know. If it had fallen into those mercenaries' hands, that would be a disaster. But maybe the labyrinth never intended its secrets to leave." Gabriel overheard, looking up. "We can't unsee or unlearn what we found. Keeping this book safe might be the only way to preserve the labyrinth's legacy. If the labyrinth collapsed, well, at least some of it survives." Selena pressed her lips together. "When we get back, we must ensure no one exploits what's inside. We owe the labyrinth that respect." Gabriel's eyes flickered with a shadow of guilt. "Agreed. I won't deny my ambition, but I'm not a monster. This knowledge has to be handled responsibly." Oswald, who'd been scanning the horizon, returned. "We should keep moving. A storm is rolling in." They trudged onward, a cold wind nipping at their exposed skin. The mountains were unforgiving. Even though the labyrinth lay behind them, the journey to safety felt almost as daunting. Hours passed in a blur of slippery terrain and biting gusts. As dusk settled, they found a small cave that offered partial shelter from the elements. They built a modest fire using dry brush, huddling close for warmth. Over meager rations, conversation inevitably drifted back to the labyrinth's illusions and revelations. Oswald cleared his throat. "I'm not one for mystical nonsense, but that place, it showed me something from my past. A friend I failed long ago. He died in a climbing accident, and I always blamed myself." He frowned at the flickering flames. Seeing that memory was painful, but also cleansing. "I think I needed to face it." Brad understood the sentiment. The labyrinth had dredged up regrets, forcing him to confront them without distraction. There was a strange catharsis in that. Maybe that's the labyrinth's gift, to make us face what we bury. Selena tucked her knees to her chest. "I spent years researching art and artifacts, driven partly by a desire to honor my grandmother's legacy. She was the one who introduced me to history's treasures. Seeing her lullaby echo in those corridors reaffirmed my path. I'm doing this for her, not for fame." Gabriel, fiddling with the tome's clasp, spoke quietly. My father was an archaeologist. He believed in preserving artifacts for humanity, but he died before finishing his life's work. I inherited his library, his debts. I wandered into questionable circles, rationalizing that I was saving relics from worse fates. The labyrinth forced me to see how far I'd strayed from my father's ideals. Brad placed a hand on the ancient tome. So what now? If we intend to protect the labyrinth's legacy, we should probably keep quiet about what happened. Selena nodded solemnly. Yes, we can't just publish its location. The best we can do is quietly ensure no further expeditions endanger it. The labyrinth might have collapsed or sealed itself. We have to assume it's still there in some form, waiting. Gabriel exhaled. I'll rely on your guidance. We can examine the book, interpret it carefully. If it contains any revelations that serve humanity, for example, cures for diseases or lost knowledge that benefits all, maybe we share it discreetly. Otherwise, we can seal it. Oswald stood. I'll do my part, though I'm no scholar. I only ask for honesty and caution. They all nodded, a silent bond forming. The labyrinth had bound their destinies. That night, as the wind howled outside, Brad dreamed again of the subterranean corridors. But instead of terror, the dream held a gentle hush, like the labyrinth was at peace, having tested them and found them worthy enough to carry a piece of its story. Chapter 5. Return to the lodge. Dawn brought a silver sky, the storm clouds dispersing. The group pressed forward, eventually descending to lower elevations where pine forests stretched across rolling hills. By midday, they spotted a dirt track leading toward the original lodge. When they finally saw the lodge's timber walls through the trees, relief washed over them. Smoke curled from the chimney, and lights glowed in the windows. Civilization. Inside, the proprietor gasped at their ragged appearance and rushed to prepare hot soup. News of a local quake had spread, and some speculated it was just a minor tremor. No one imagined the true cause lay in the depths of a hidden labyrinth. Brad slipped away to his room, washing off layers of grime. Staring in the mirror, he felt different. The labyrinth's echoes had lingered, reshaping his perspective on regrets and future choices. He couldn't easily return to normal life without acknowledging that transformation. After dinner, the four reunited in a private corner of the lodge lounge. Selena unwrapped the ancient tome from her pack, carefully placing it on the table. They had to see what secrets it contained. The tarnished clasp resisted at first, but with some gentle coaxing and a quiet prayer, Gabriel managed to pop it open. Dust puffed out and they coughed. Inside, the parchment pages were crammed with symbols, diagrams, and lines of archaic script. Selena's eyes danced with scholarly excitement. Some of these glyphs resemble old forms of proto-languages from multiple continents. It's like a synthesis of human linguistic evolution. Gabriel traced a spiraling diagram. This might outline the labyrinth's architecture, with references to different chambers of memory, possibly instructions on how it all functions. Oswald observed from a distance, uneasy. Be sure you don't unleash something we don't understand. Brad nodded in agreement. We have a responsibility to treat this knowledge carefully. Let's see if we can translate any major points, but keep it discreet. Selena spent hours cross-referencing notes in her personal journal. Gabriel provided insights from his father's archived research. By candlelight, they deciphered fragments suggesting the labyrinth was constructed millennia ago by an advanced culture that believed in preserving the essence of human experience within living stone. Some pages hinted at an eternal archive, connecting mortal memories to something transcendent. A recurring phrase translated to "reflections are our path," implying the labyrinth's purpose was not just to store memories, but to guide travelers toward reconciliation with their own truths. Brad couldn't help but recall how the labyrinth had forced him to see long-buried regrets. So, it's a place of atonement or personal reckoning, he mused. Gabriel turned a page, revealing a curious illustration of a masked figure offering a flame to a line of travelers. Symbols indicated the cost of clarity, suggesting that illusions of a labyrinth could become perilous if approached with selfish intent. Oswald rubbed his temples. That matches our experience. It tested us, showed us parts of ourselves we weren't ready to see. They finished their initial examination late into the night. The tome was far too extensive for quick translation. Carefully, Selena wrapped it again in protective cloth. We'll study it properly back home, cross-referencing libraries. Meanwhile, let's not publicize anything. Gabriel agreed, though Brad sensed the man's inner conflict between intellectual curiosity and a sense of responsibility. In the following days, they arranged discreet transport away from the lodge. Brad used his connections to ensure safe passage, explaining they were returning from a private trek. He insisted they maintain contact, establishing a coded method of communication to exchange research findings. One evening, just before departure, Brad stood alone on the lodge's balcony again. This time, the sky was clear, stars blazing. He felt the crisp air fill his lungs, and memories of the labyrinth swirled, some painful, some liberating. A footstep rustled behind him. Selena approached, offering a tentative smile. "We're leaving tomorrow. I wanted to thank you for trusting me, for risking so much." Brad leaned on the railing. "If you hadn't contacted me, I'd never have known about the labyrinth. It changed me. I'm grateful." She nodded softly. "What will you do when you return to your life in LA?" He exhaled, thoughtful. "Live more authentically, I suppose. Maybe pick projects that resonate with deeper truths, support efforts that preserve cultural wonders. The labyrinth taught me we carry so much inside. Our regrets, hopes, loves. We can't ignore them if we want real fulfillment." Selena's gaze flicked toward the starry sky. "I'll keep deciphering the tome. Maybe it'll reveal more about how to preserve what the labyrinth stands for. Our world could use a place of reflection, though perhaps not in the same overwhelming form." A hush stretched between them, filled by night's gentle breath. Though they had only known each other briefly, the labyrinth's trials forged a bond that would linger beyond these mountains. Eventually, Selena bid him good night. Brad remained on the balcony a while longer, gazing at the dark silhouettes of the peaks. He silently promised to guard the labyrinth's mystery and glean its lessons. In the morning, their small group parted ways with the lodge staff, who remained blissfully unaware of the hidden realm beneath the Nordwind peaks. The travelers packed their gear into a nondescript SUV, heading to an airstrip where a private plane awaited. Throughout the journey, they glimpsed occasional military or rescue vehicles along the mountain roads, possibly investigating the recent tremor. None suspected an ancient labyrinth slumbered below. At the airstrip, Brad, Selena, Oswald, and Gabriel had a final conversation under the whirring drone of propellers. They agreed on a vow. The labyrinth's location and secrets would remain guarded. They would share minimal details with trusted experts who could help interpret the tome ethically. Oswald, stoic as ever, parted with a firm handshake. "If you need a guide again, I'm your man, but hopefully next time, it'll be somewhere less terrifying." Gabriel smirked. "We'll see. Thanks for not leaving me behind, even when you doubted me." Selena offered a gentle farewell, promising to send updates once she safely archived the tome. As for Brad, he clasped each of their hands, sincerity in his eyes. "Whatever happens, we stand as the labyrinth's protectors now." And with that, they dispersed, each bound for a different corner of the world, each carrying the labyrinth's echoes deep within their hearts. Chapter 6. A stranger in Hollywood. Weeks later, Brad was back in Los Angeles. The swirl of his day-to-day responsibilities reasserted itself. Meetings, phone calls, charities, potential film scripts. Yet he moved through it all with a new awareness, an undercurrent of introspection. From time to time, a fleeting anxiety struck him. Had the labyrinth truly sealed itself against further intrusion? The memory of mercenaries smashing at its core returned in nightmares. But he took solace in believing the labyrinth's own defenses had prevailed, burying or concealing the path once more. Late one afternoon, as he stepped out of a meeting on an upcoming film project, his phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. He answered, half expecting a telemarketer. Instead, Selena's voice greeted him. "Brat, it's me." she said, sounding excited. I'm safe. Gabriel and I have been collaborating. The tome's preliminary translations indicate the labyrinth wasn't physically destroyed, only forcibly closed in some sections. The structure might still exist, healing itself. Relief flooded him. I'm glad to hear that. So the labyrinth endures. Yes, but it's dangerous. We've identified references to a watchful, some force or caretaker that can guide or repel entrance. Possibly the presence we encountered that spoke to us. It suggests the labyrinth can remain dormant until it senses a new threat or seeker. Brad swallowed, memories of that powerful voice echoing in his mind. So there's a kind of guardian built into it. Exactly. Also, there's a prophecy-like passage mentioning a return of the bearers of reflection. It's cryptic, but it might imply that those who've experienced the labyrinth, like us, are entrusted with a duty to keep its spirit alive in the outside world. He looked around at the bustling city street, contrasting sharply with the labyrinth's quiet solemnity. So he spread its message indirectly? That reflection and reconciliation are essential to humanity. Selena's tone softened. Yes, I believe so. We shouldn't create a cult or anything, but we can champion the value of introspection, historical preservation, empathy. Small steps, but meaningful. Brad gazed at the shimmering skyscrapers. I could do that. Through film, philanthropy, personal example. There are ways to nudge people towards self-awareness and respect for the past. They shared a moment of understanding. Then Selena mentioned she'd speak at a private academic conference, carefully presenting some labyrinth artifacts, nothing that revealed the location. She hoped to garner support among ethical historians. After they hung up, Brad exhaled. A subtle thrill warmed him. He was part of something larger now, bridging ancient mysteries and modern civilization. He strolled through the city, noticing passers-by with fresh eyes. Everyone carried hidden memories, regrets, aspirations. If only more found a place to reflect and grow, maybe the labyrinth's purpose could echo outward. His next meeting was with a big-name director who wanted him for a flashy action film. Initially, Brad's agent insisted it would be a major hit. But as he sat across from the director, swirling his coffee, he felt the labyrinth's lesson tug at him. He politely declined, explaining that he was seeking projects with deeper resonance. The director looked surprised, maybe even disappointed, but Brad felt at peace. He had no desire to churn out superficial content. Life was finite. His energy should be spent on endeavors that genuinely mattered. That evening, he visited a small community center he'd helped fund, offering arts programs for underprivileged youth. Sitting in the back of a makeshift theater, he watched teenagers rehearse a short play they'd written themselves, raw emotion and earnest dreams on display. Their honesty moved him. He saw faint reflections of the labyrinth in their quest to express stories that might otherwise remain hidden. Quietly, he decided to donate more resources for the center. A subtle step forward in his vow to share the labyrinth's spirit, enabling people to explore their own truths. Chapter 7. Ripple Effects. Months passed, bringing new opportunities and challenges. Brad found himself drawn toward humanitarian and artistic ventures that emphasized empathy, self-discovery, and cultural heritage. He hosted small gatherings with creatives and thinkers, discussing how film and art could foster introspection. He supported archaeological preservation efforts worldwide, though he never mentioned the labyrinth by name. Selena occasionally sent coded updates. She was making headway in translating more of the tome's pages. One excerpt described rituals of cleansing, ceremonies ancient visitors performed before stepping into the labyrinth's deeper corridors. These rituals seemed designed to ensure travelers confronted personal guilt or burdens first, minimizing harm from the labyrinth's illusions. Gabriel's messages were more sporadic, often referencing leads on other hidden sites. He claimed to have reformed from black market dealings, focusing on legitimate rescue of endangered artifacts. Whether or not that was true, Brad chose to give him the benefit of the doubt. Their shared trials in the labyrinth formed a tenuous friendship. Meanwhile, rumors quietly surfaced in Europe of mountaineers hearing strange echoes near the Nordwind Peaks. Some described feeling an uncanny presence at dusk. Local folklore revived old tales about a whispering valley. Brad couldn't help but worry that curiosity seekers might attempt to find the labyrinth. One day, he received a grim call from Oswald. Two explorers turned up missing in those mountains. The authorities assume an avalanche, but I wonder if they stumbled onto something they couldn't handle. If you hear anything else, let me know. The labyrinth weighed on Brad's mind. Even if it had sealed many passages, its allure was unstoppable for certain adventurers. He wrote to Selena about his concerns, urging they intensify efforts to keep details hidden. She agreed, quietly lobbying local authorities to restrict certain trails for safety reasons. Life continued, overshadowed by the labyrinth's legacy, but never dominated by it. Brad balanced film projects, philanthropic work, and personal growth spurred by that subterranean revelation. He felt more grounded, more sincere, as if the labyrinth had stripped away layers of superficiality. One night, as he sat in his quiet Los Angeles home, gazing at a single labyrinthine spiral he'd drawn on paper, he heard a faint echo in his thoughts, the labyrinth's voice, or perhaps his own memory of it. Reflections are our path. He closed his eyes, letting that phrase resonate. Humans are shaped by the stories we carry. Sometimes, acknowledging those stories is the first step toward healing or transformation. In that moment, he resolved to speak publicly about the power of personal reflection, without revealing the labyrinth itself. Perhaps a speech at a major charity gala or a public forum would allow him to gently guide people toward introspection. Chapter 8. Awakening the World, a major environmental and cultural preservation gala loomed on Brad's calendar. It was a star-studded event hosted at a historic downtown building, bringing celebrities, philanthropists, and activists under one roof. Typically, such galas revolve around dinner, silent auctions, and brief speeches. This time, Brad was the keynote speaker. Weeks before, he prepared a thoughtful speech focusing on the synergy between preserving our natural landscapes and honoring the intangible heritage of human experiences. He wove in references to how so many societies harness ancient sites for spiritual reflection. On the night of the gala, the hall glittered with chandeliers and formal attire. The hum of conversation filled the air. Brad took the stage to polite applause. He stood at the podium, heart steady, labyrinth echoes drifting in his memory. He spoke of how the Earth's hidden treasures, caverns, ancient ruins, remote monasteries, weren't just tourist curiosities. They embodied humanity's collective memory, calling us to remember lessons from the past. Then, he pivoted, describing how each individual also carried a labyrinth within, a place where regrets, hopes, and truths dwelled. If we neglect these inner corridors, we risk losing ourselves, he said, his voice calm yet resonant. Reflection isn't a luxury, it's essential for growth. Just as we protect sacred landscapes, we should protect our personal inner sanctums, listening to what they whisper. The crowd listened, some visibly moved. Others seemed puzzled, but the sincerity in Brad's tone held their attention. He concluded with a subtle vow to support projects worldwide that encourage responsible stewardship of cultural sites. After the applause, multiple attendees approached him, moved by his words. Some asked if he was referencing a specific place. He politely demurred, explaining that the concept was more universal. Any hidden site or memory can serve as a labyrinth, if we let it. Among the well-wishers was a young archaeologist named Dr. Ingrid Walsh. She offered Brad a handshake, her eyes glimmering with curiosity. "Your speech, it resonated with me. I study lesser-known caves in Central Europe. Maybe we can collaborate." Brad's pulse quickened momentarily. "That's wonderful," he said, forging a smile. "Feel free to send me details. But I must caution you, some places are best left in peace." She nodded thoughtfully. "Understand. My mentor said something similar. Not every ruin wants to be rediscovered." As the gala wound down, Brad felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd shared a piece of the labyrinth's lesson without giving away its secrets. The seeds of reflection were sown, nudging others to respect hidden wonders and their own inner journeys. Chapter 9. Requiem and Hope. Over the following year, life's tapestry wove on. Selena advanced her translations, occasionally unveiling new Labyrinth manuscripts that chronicled how ancient visitors overcame personal demons by confronting them within the echoing corridors. Gabriel managed to discreetly auction some legitimate artifacts from other sites, funding philanthropic ventures aimed at preserving cultural heritage. Oswald guided safer mountain tours, ensuring no curious traveler strayed too close to the Labyrinth's domain. Brad found renewed passion in producing films with more meaningful themes, stories of redemption, the power of memory, the significance of preserving heritage. Audiences noted a deeper sincerity in his performances. Even critics remarked that his work carried a richer emotional weight. And all the while, the Labyrinth's echoes lingered in his mind. Late at night, he'd reread notes from Selena, marveling at the Labyrinth's complexity, once a legend, now part of his reality. He'd recall the swirling illusions, the quiet voice that both demanded and offered reflection. Still, questions gnawed at him. Did the Labyrinth survive the cataclysm at its core? Might it one day open again, calling new wanderers? Should he return? He got his answer unexpectedly. One dawn, a letter arrived at his Los Angeles doorstep, bearing the Labyrinth's spiral seal. Inside was a short note in Selena's handwriting. Brad, I visited the Nordwind region discreetly with local authorities. There was a partial collapse near the valley cliffs, but certain seismic readings suggest large sections of the underground system remain intact. We set subtle protections around the area, labeling it a restricted conservation zone due to geological fragility. I'm confident the Labyrinth still breathes, dormant but not dead. Remember, we carry its reflection in our hearts, ensuring its wisdom echoes beyond those buried corridors. Yours, Selena. He smiled softly at the final line. Yes, the Labyrinth lived on, both beneath the mountains and within them. He placed the letter in a wooden box that held his most cherished mementos. That evening, gazing at a California sunset, he felt an unspoken bond with Selena, Oswald, Gabriel, and the Labyrinth itself. Their shared journey was not a typical adventure or movie plot. It was a quiet transformation. In his mind's eye, he pictured the Labyrinth of reflections still humming with ancient voices, waiting for the day it might test another traveler's heart. And in the meantime, Brad Pitt, actor, philanthropist, guardian of a secret older than recorded history, would do his part to keep the Labyrinth spirit alive in a world that often forgets to listen to its own echoes.